30 hours every week, and you still don't know. EA drops and the market moves fast. You read it last week's data, how long does that last? Crude and nat gas telling you a story. Visibility, velocity, that's the glory. One signal every morning before your coffee's cold. Green means go, red means hold. This is rogue radar, signal every day. Oil and natural gas cleared out of your way. 5 minutes of clarity, that's all you need. Get the rogue method free, then let rogue radar read the market. EnergyRogue.com.
EnergyRogue.com. Hello, folks. Bill and Brian here with Energy Rogue. And listen, it's time for our weekly update, and we're excited today. We're going to be talking about, not the Strait of Hormuz, not crude oil, but ethane. That's right. I said it, ethane, the forgotten gas.
Yeah.
The one that nobody knows what to do with.
Yep.
Sometimes it's a problem. Sometimes it's a benefit. Sometimes you just don't know what to do with it. And sometimes you don't even know what you're doing with it, because what
Right.
you decide contractually is not necessarily what actually gets done.
Yep.
Right. I mean,
Yep.
there's
There's a physical reality and a financial one. And we're
Right.
gonna demystify that a little bit, because as Bill said, ethane is one that people forget about. And a lot of times when we're looking at natural gas, a lot of people or skip over the fact in production you have natural gas and natural gas liquids that travel together, and then they get separated because not all the natural gas liquids travel as a liquid. Some of them have to
Right.
be held under pressure. You can think about your propane tank for your barbecue pit. It's that time of year, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It is that time of year. Feels
Of
like
course,
it.
it's not
been weird
real
this week.
barbecue if you're using propane. If you're using propane, you're grilling hot dogs and hamburgers.
Oh, come on.
Real
Come on.
barbecue is on a
Come on,
smoke
Hank
pit with
Hill.
mesquite. That's right.
But essentially what we're gonna map out is when you have a producer that produces natural gas and natural gas liquids, they travel together for a period of time before they go to a processing plant. And at that processing plant, they split out NGLs into one stream, and then they split out natural gas into another. And that is purely the methane component. And this is what utilities will use to generate power or redistribute to residential and commercial uses for natural gas,
Right.
like for furnace heat. But then natural gas liquids, a lot of people don't realize, well, this includes right here at this point, ethane, propane, butane, two types, isobutane and normal butane, and what's called natural gasoline. This is not gasoline that you get at the station, but this is a little bit more denser as in the natural gas liquid stream, but lighter
Yeah.
in relative terms to crude oil.
And sometimes you hear that called pentanes, and what that goes by is that it's the part of the natural gas that has 5 carbons or more. Hence, the 5 is the pentane. So any 5 carbons or more are included in that natural gasoline, which will
Right.
also include some condensate as well.
Yep.
So
And so what we're going to be talking about today is downstream from natural gas at this stage at the processing, it goes to consumption markets. Now, natural gas liquids have to go to another process that is called fractionation, that actually splits it into each one of these components. So, but what we're going to talk about today is something called ethane rejection. And basically, it allows you to reject or take less of the ethane out of the natural gas stream and insert it and let it travel with the methane within pipeline tolerances and other constraints. There's constraints. We're going to talk about some of those constraints as well as what that means. And what this essentially means is that you can have increased natural gas under rejection, but decreased ethane production under that process. And this
Right.
is often a financial decision.
So the two words you'll hear is rejection and recovery.
Mhm.
And in Brian's technical drawing there, rejections happens at the top, going with the natural gas. What it does is that it gets, instead of getting the processing plant cold enough to bring the ethane out, they keep it just a little bit. That ethane can actually travel inside the natural gas stream. Now, the only caution is that those plants will manage that because the pipeline it's going into has BTU requirements. Ethane will pump up the BTU in natural gas.
Yep.
And so they can only do that to a certain level to where they don't exceed the BTU restrictions on their outgoing pipe. When they recover it, they send it down with the NGLs. And the reason people flip flop on this is because the price of ethane can go back and forth of whether it's worth more as a gas or worth more as a liquid.
Right.
And we've seen as a liquid that ethane can have a negative price because by the time you get it to where it's at, once you pay the TNF, you may have a negative price back at the processing plant for ethane. And the processing plant, if you have a recovery contract, will charge you that negative amount as part of your statement. So that's when you look at your statement and you see the ethane price is negative, is because the price of ethane at the fractionation facility is less than the cost of the TFF. So that's how those finances work. So Brian, what's the common use of ethane that you know of?
Well, and when you look at the chemistry, and I'm not a chemist, so I'm going to get in trouble with all the chemistry and chemical engineers out there.
All right, you're not a chemist, you're not an artist. What are you, man?
I'm just a guy trying to make it in this big wide world. That's all I am.
Oh, there you go. Just a dude, man.
Just a dude. Just a dude. Just a dude. So, but what I've laid out here is that when you look at the chemical composition, you look at the carbon elements, and when you look at the carbon elements, you have a C component. And if you have one C, that equals methane, which is natural gas. And then if you have two, you have ethane, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Then if you have three, you have propane, 4, butane, 5, and this goes all the way up to, I think, like what, 15, 20, something like that?
Well, yeah, actually it goes all the way to 52, so.
Okay, goes all the way up to 52. So, so anyhow, what we're really talking about is the mechanical process of natural gas processing that allows these two to intermingle to where you can create a little bit more methane in our natural gas pipeline system by reducing the ethane that we produce at the natural gas processing facilities. So that's essentially what we're going to be talking about today. And let me.
And the one thing that we will talk about that is in your contract, you may choose to do recovery. All you're affecting is the price. You're not really affecting what's going on at the gas plant. The gas plant will do what it needs to do. You're going to get paid according to your contract. Mm-hmm. So if you're getting recovery price, they may or may not be recovering ethane.
Right.
They're just going to pay you for it. So that's why Brian says it's a financial decision, both on your part and both on the processing plant part.
And so sometimes you can think about it this way. It's a financial decision. Sometimes that replicates what's happening in reality. Sometimes it's just
That's correct.
contractual, right? So sometimes
Right.
the plant physically does it, and sometimes the plant actually just arranges the math to pretend like they did and they didn't.
Right.
So
So,
that's what
so
we're
the
going to
number
talk
one
about.
use of ethane, so we'll see, is that number one use of ethane is basically for plastics. That's
Yep.
what you'll see most of the time as the ethane is being used for the plastics. And it's a catalyst, like natural gas is a catalyst sometimes, but ethane sometimes is a catalyst for the plastics. You know what is the most unusual things I've heard ethane used for? Never knew this
What's
till
that?
just about a year ago.
What's that?
It's bananas, man.
What? Wait. What do you mean? What's the? Those are two separate things. What are you talking about? Ethane and bananas. I
They
don't
will
understand.
inject ethane as a gas into these huge rooms with bananas, and it helps the bananas ripen faster.
I had
Never
no
knew that.
idea.
Never knew that. And it's just crazy to think about. But you know what? So all I'm gonna say is when you recover ethane, you're bananas.
Well, and
Look it up.
essentially,
Hey, listen, I'll agree that I don't know everything, but this one caught me off guard. So help me out. Tell me I'm yes, no. Put it in the comments. Say no, Bill, you're bananas. They don't use that, but I think you'll find that. And I won't tell you how I know this, but a certain person that I know worked at a place in that deals with a lot of bananas, whose name starts with a W and ends with Mart. So yeah, ethane
okay.
to ripen bananas.
Yep. And just to kind of reroute, here is the natural gas, this little slide by Williams, and it
Oh, there you
basically
go.
shows the carbon components of natural gas, which has one, propane right here, ethane right here. You can see 1, 2 for ethane, 4 for butane right here, 5 for pentane, and then 4 also for isobutane because there's normal and iso. So just a little chemistry
Yeah,
lesson.
yeah. I used to work for those guys. Let me tell you something. They know their chemistry.
Yeah, they do. Um, but part of the reason that we're talking about this today is it impacts natural gas liquid markets, ethane markets, and natural gas markets. And this happens daily. There are processing plants that make this decision daily, and they're making future decisions based upon that. And what we do is we actually track this on the day so that we know for July, for instance, the economics are in favor for a normal mid-continent molecule, that it's 4.3 cents per MCF in favor of rejection. So you can also take a look into the future. It's actually 3.5. So it is contracting, but it gets very dependent on your composition. That's part of the reason that we actually structured this so that producers and midstreamers can actually change what the composition is, because that changes the math right here. Like you can see what I just did is I changed some of the ethane, and let's take propane back down. So if propane is back down, but then let's pump up the natural gasoline, and let's go ahead and make the propane larger. Now all of a sudden you start to see if the propane was larger, you can have a higher recovery. You can actually flip from a recovery to a rejection, and vice versa. So it's basically a financial management between ethane and methane predominantly, but propane plays a factor in it as well because it's very nuanced. So essentially what we're talking about is if the economics are in favor, if ethane is worth more on a BTU basis as a liquid, then it will be recovered. If it is worth more on a BTU basis as a gas, it will be sold into the natural gas stream. That's essentially what we're talking about. And the economics are really when ethane price exceeds the value of natural gas value, plus transportation and fractionation costs. That's when you're going to recover. And different processing plants have different capabilities. So what gets unique about this is you can have processing plants that have the capability of operating and recovering and rejecting, and processing plants that don't have that much switchability. But then you can have a different chemical composition for what different processing plants. So it's a very nuanced part of the market, but it's an underpinning of something that could drive, let's see, close to 2 to 5% of increased supply if you switch from recovery to rejection. You would have
Right.
2 to 5 BCF a day added to the equation if you switch from recovery to rejection. But if you switch from rejection to recovery, you're going to lose 2 to 5 BCF a day.
Right.
So it is a big impact out of 105 BCF a day or 107 BCF a day, right, Bill?
That's right. And the other thing is also the larger plants have a better ability to recover ethane. The smaller
Mm-hmm.
the plant is, it's not enough gas to make a difference. It
Right.
just sort of gets thrown in with everything in when as part of the Y grade, and so that's really going to make the difference. And the economics is driven by the fractionation process. And what's interesting, there's only about 3 places that do fractionation in the U.S.
Well, there's Mont Belvieu,
Yeah,
Conway, and I
right.
know there's some in Hobbs, but I believe in the Northeast they have some added
Well,
fractionation.
Fort Chicago brings in the Canadian gas, and it does
Okay.
stuff up there.
All right.
And so
Well, and
that's where
fractionators
you see
come
the
in all
friction.
sizes. We're talking about the big
Right,
ones, right?
right. Yeah, you can fractionate anything. It's called a deethanizer. And at the Jayhawk plant, when I was working for Lynn, Jayhawk had a deethanizer. And so they had a
Mm-hmm.
deethanizer and a depropanizer because
Yep.
we were selling propane into the local market.
Yep.
And so, but they would just take that ethane and push it right back into to the to the Y grade. So they
Well, and
weren't there was no local market for ethane there.
essentially the variables that producers and midstreamers need to calculate to understand this is going to be the ethane price. That's one
Right.
component. The positive TNF on the netback. In other words, what is the transportation and fractionation from that physical location to where it's going to be fractionated? Because that's kind of where the market is. And then the last component is going to be the efficiency of the plant, because the
Right.
efficiency drives how effective it can be at rejecting ethane from, say, a 90% recovery to a 10% recovery. If you have a less efficient plant, you may have a 75% recovery, but then if you reject it, you might still have 50%.
Right.
So if you have a
And it counts it
less
and it counts 100% in the natural gas stream. So that's really what you're talking about.
yep.
And so, and by the way, those values are measured in cents per gallon. So that's
Yes.
why it's important to understand your gallons on your, you'll see it on your statement. It'll tell you how many gallons of ethane that you're getting,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll see the cents per gallon. And so a lot of these guys will have, if ethane's selling for a nickel down in Mont Belvieu and it's costing you a dime to get there, you'll get a negative 5 cent per gallon
Right.
charge on your ethane based on the gas analysis that you've agreed to in the contract.
Right. You're exactly right. So when you're looking at the logic is going to be on a netback threshold. Rejection triggers when the ethane netback falls below the methane equivalent, or the BTU value in the gas stream. And this also can avoid uneconomic fees like Bill just talked about. If you have a 15-cent T&F rate, but ethane is only worth 10 cents, you have a negative. Well, you want to reject that because a negative price on the product isn't worth capturing. It's worth more as a BTU. So this is where some of the nuanced, it gets very specific on the particular location. And we actually have models with several processors in the United States and around the globe that actually come, and we develop these models so that midstreamers can monitor ethane rejection on a daily basis, and so that producers can also measure their netback decisions on whether or not they should reject or recover, because a lot of times that's a contractual election that producers have the ability to make in most natural gas processing contracts. Not all, most of the newer ones, right?
Also, yes, and you also have to realize that there's a timing issue. You only have to a certain time of the month to elect rejection or recovery.
Right. Right.
And if you don't make a decision, it's left up to the plant. Basically, in their, sometimes there's a default written in there, but most of the time it's left up to the plant. Also, when we talk about the efficiency of a single plant, check your contract. Always check your contract, because some of the midstreams, who will remain nameless at this point, will do a average of all the plants in their system, and that's what you get as a recovery.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, you're exactly right. And lastly is pipeline gas quality. We're going to touch on that a little bit more, but the more ethane that you put into the methane stream changes the gas quality and the BTU spec of the blended in the pipeline. And it can't be too much for utilities and end users and transmission operators to operate their equipment. So there's a balance, there's a threshold. So this is a quantitative measure of how much methane and ethane can be saturated into it. This is roughly 7.8% of the ethane saturation in the gas stream. So you can add 7.8% of ethane in there, but it is going to be highly location dependent. It is also going to be located, or it is also going to depend on how much gas this area contributes. In other words, if it's 7.8% on 100,000 MMBTUs a day, well, if they're blending into something that is flowing a BCF a day, it's a drop in the bucket. It's not going to be a big thing, so they can probably override that 7.8% max saturation, because it really depends on the compressors and downstream, because when you push more molecules, again, when we're looking at this, the more of carbon components you have, the more difficult it is for equipment to handle it, or the natural gas equipment, because they're designed for methane, right?
And that's right. And so the other thing you need to remember is that the molecule of ethane is not equal to the molecule of methane, is because it has about 20% more heating value. And so it takes up the same space, but it ups the total BTU of everything.
Yep.
And so, so that's, there's a lot of logic to it, but the idea here is that there are requirements, there are restrictions, and the gas plant will have to acknowledge those, operate by those, no matter what your contract says.
Right.
And so just remember, those two things are separate. What really happens, what your contract says. And so you're concerned about what your contract says as a producer, so you know what you're getting paid on.
Right. And traders really look at it from this lens, which is, what is the arbitrage? what is the difference between the recovery and the
Right.
rejection, and what is the bottom line BTU valuation on a per MCF basis. So that is what, and traders are concerned because this drives volume, because remember this number, 250,000 barrels a day. Okay, remember that number, because I'm going to show you something that's going to flip your head in a minute. Now, what's required to consume this is roughly 5 BCF a day. So that needs to saturate it. So
Right.
let's talk about the regional divide. So hang on to that 250,000 barrels a day. Anadarko and Rockies, these are flexible basins, mainly because of their proximity to fractionation, such as Conway and pipelines that deliver from the Anadarko and Rockies down to the Gulf Coast, where Mont Belvieu is, where the other fractionator is. But there's roughly 210,000 barrels of combined capacity in this region. And we're just talking about ethane and the rejection capacity there. But this, the Anadarko supply shifted dramatically between October of 2023 and January, and it created a 150,000 barrel a day swing in 90 days because of some of the dynamics. So this is the swing basin, Anadarko and Rockies. So that's one basin. Next one is Permian. Well, natural gas prices in Permian are actually negative. So you want to extract as much as possible on the liquid side because it travels differently. So with suppressed Waha pricing and infrastructure first, a lot of the processing plants in the Permian that are handling the natural gas there are newer, and so they have better rejection capability. And this is where rejection is unlikely because gas is negative here, and something is better than nothing on the ethane value.
Right.
So that's the Permian. And the Northeast, this one's interesting. I looked this up before we started recording. Enterprise Products operates a reblending facility in Natchitoches. How do you say that?
I think Texas, maybe sort of like Nacogdoches, almost Natchitoches.
Okay. And I had to look this up because I actually didn't know this location off the top of my head. But here's where it is, which is in between. Whoa, there we go.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm trying to draw, but it's right in the center. If you can see, when I try and draw, my screen goes weird. So
Also, it's
right
right by Alexandria. Yeah.
Yep. Well, essentially, think about it this way: Baton Rouge, Southern Louisiana, Shreveport, Northern Louisiana, Natchitoches.
Sure.
You know
Whatever.
what? If any Cajun is listening, I apologize because I have been really doing a poor job on any Cajun locations my entire lifetime. So, matter of fact, when I started the business, I asked, well, what about LaFork County? And I was talking to somebody in Louisiana, and they said, what? And I said, LaFork County. And he goes, you mean Lafouche Parish? I'm not good at this. So any Cajun words, I'm just not good. So just uh, forgive me. Forgive me. I apologize. But up to 50,000 barrels a day can be blended into the Gulf Coast gas streams. So what this facility does is it takes some of the idle barrels that can't find a good market and reblends them into pipeline systems, because that part of the country has very big pipelines going through it. So this
Right.
is
And they have purity pipelines, so it could bring ethane. There's an ethane purity line that goes between the Mont Belvieu and over to the river.
right.
And so my guess is they're right on that pipeline to where they could take that purity ethane out and reblend it back into a natural gas pipeline. That would be my guess.
Yep. I think you're right. So what are some of the risks and disruptions? Now, remember that 250,000 barrels a day that could be rejected, right? So that means 250,000 barrels a day could be reinjected into the gas stream. Now, contrast that with 750,000 barrels a day that we currently export. Okay, we're currently exporting ethane, and right now we're probably exporting even more than this, mainly because why, Bill? Why would we be exporting more than this right now?
I knew we'd have to talk about it. I thought we weren't going to talk about it. I thought we were going to get by, but no, it's the Strait of Hormuz. Qatar is one of the biggest suppliers of ethane. They export a lot of ethane out. And since they can't get ships out, guess who has to pick up the slack?
Right.
Well, we're doing our best to catch up the slack. Why would we do that? Money, baby.
Yep. Ethane is worth more internationally right now. Propane as well, mainly because that facility going down has restricted ethane, propane from hitting some markets, some key petrochemical processes in China, and as a result, we're exporting more. Now, think about this: if you're rejecting or recovering ethane, if you're recovering ethane, but you're thinking about adding to the natural gas mix and you actually switch from recovery to rejecting, you're putting more natural gas into the place into play. So right now we are rejecting across the country for the most part. For the most part, we're because the economics are aligned for rejection. For the most part, it is going to be highly local. But bear in mind, if that's rejected and it's going into the gas stream, if markets get normalized and we don't export as much, that means that we're going to have more barrels in the country. So the rejection is going to most likely stay that way
Right.
because there's too much ethane that's already coming into the market because we'll have more ethane coming back into the US market.
And
So
when
I
you see
probably
that,
took
and
a very inefficient way of explaining that.
when you see that happens, what Brian is the bottom line is that you'll see more natural gas available. Therefore, it's going to affect the price in a downward way.
So essentially, if you have in the natural gas stream 250,000 barrels a day of rejection, okay, let's say it's going into the natural gas stream. It is not going into ethane markets, okay? But if you have 750,000 barrels a day of ethane export going here and that gets reduced, then you're going to have more barrels pushed here, which means this 250,000 is really not going to have a place to go, which means the rejection economics are likely to continue and the ethane is probably in position to, in that case, would reduce in value because there'd be more supply. So that means that we're going to have more natural gas going forward. So, what is the technical burden? Well, there's contract complexity because every producer and every processor has different contracts as far as what the rights are, the structures, the fees, the recovery rights, the election windows. Some of them have annual windows, believe it or not.
Right.
Election deadlines is another one. Bill mentioned that a little earlier. Most of them are probably mid-month, between the 15th and 20th, would you say, Bill?
Yeah, that it's before bid week. It's like a week before bid week is what it usually turns out to be. And so that usually runs between the 15th and 20th.
Yep. And then real
And
time.
it'll say in your contract, it'll say 10 days before the end of the month or something like that. That's what it
Yep.
usually goes with.
And real time composition data. And part of the reason that we've worked with processors and producers is when you're looking at this dynamic environment, you can actually look into this and look into the future so that you can identify how much of your value is at risk. Like if you don't have a lot of ethane, but you have more propane, it's going to be more likely that you're going to want to recover. And that's why we built this tool, so that we could have the real-time composition running that math, because it's really, it's, what's the terminology you use? It's not complicated, but it's,
Complex.
there you go. Because it has to do with a bunch of variables, right? And you have variables upon variables. You calculate one thing in parentheses and you use that as another input for another calculation that has other set of parentheses. And all of it is really not complicated calculus math, but it has a lot of parentheses. So there's a lot of iterations. You have to calculate this before you can calculate this. Calculate this before you can calculate this. There's a sequencing. So
If you're from Oklahoma, it's really simple. It's just trying to figure out, am I going to use the mild barbecue sauce based on what restaurant I happen to be at and how good their meat is? And so it's
right.
those type of calculations that you're always trying to figure out, and how much of it is really true. And are you a purist? And really, if you're using barbecue sauce, you're actually offending the cook. There's so many decisions to be made, but they're all so it's complex, but it's not complicated.
Exactly. So what's the path forward? The path forward is turning data into daily alpha. Now, personally, alpha is something that a lot of people look for. I don't like that terminology, but we actually use this daily ethane to actually analyze and assess what's happening in the ethane markets and the natural gas markets. So we use real-time data, calculate the netback, and daily look at this so that we can advise processors and producers alike on their contract management.
Right.
That is inside our Rogue Edge system, which there's more information. There is a link down below, and we can definitely help you on this mission. If you are a producer or processor on this, or you actually consume ethane or consume propane or butane, this has a spillover effect into those markets. And it's part of the reason that we designed Energy Rogue to really track all of these markets independent of each other, so that we can look at the total propane products supplied, ethane, normal butane, isobutane. We keep tracks of all of these so that we can understand the natural gas liquid markets. So
And so, folks, use Energy Rogue to look beyond what your purchaser or your supplier is telling you,
right.
and you'll be able to understand some of what they're saying, some of what they're thinking. And the idea here is to create your own strategy and put that into place before you go out and start trying to figure out what supplier or what is. So you'll be able to evaluate them correctly and evaluate them to the best efficiency and economics of yourself.
Yep. And so essentially, to land the plane, is ethane rejection is very complicated, but not, or it's complex. I get those mixed up. It's
Complex, but not complicated.
okay. I
X
got that.
is good. C is on.
But it impacts ethane markets, it impacts propane markets, and it impacts natural gas markets. And we triangulate all this into economic synthesis for producers, for processors, so that they can stay on top of this decision, because it is truly a day-to-day decision.
And for end users as well.
Yep. And if you are looking around, you're listening to this video because you're curious about energy markets, we do have a Mastering Clarity Rogue Method ebook. There's an information down below. It's totally free, and all you have to do is just enter your email and first name, and you will get access to that, because it's the entryway into how institutional traders look at natural gas markets, look at crude markets, at natural gas liquid markets, all of it. So listen, that's,
and while I'm not a chemical engineer,
I was in a French fry commercial when I was a kid.
I love that. Well, listen, folks, thanks so much. Thanks for spending time with us. If you learned something or you're curious about something, drop us a comment down below. If you like, subscribe, and share, it definitely helps. So we appreciate you. We appreciate you spending some time with us. So thanks so much. This is Bill and Brian. Did I point the right way? Nope, wrong way.
No, yeah, there you go.
That's Bill.
So see,
This is Brian.
that's Brian.
Bill, Brian. I got that right. Okay.
That's right.
So
Barbecue brains. There you go.
exactly. All right. Thanks so much, folks. We will see you next week. Hopefully you learned something. Let us know what you think.